Well, thank you everybody for dialing in for the first shareholder committee of the year. The first item is apologies for absent. No, before that we're doing the 72 seconds. I am remiss. Let's do the second 72 seconds of silence on the substantive agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as I was saying, apologies for absence is the first agenda item. Are there any? I haven't received any. Okay. Second, we have the declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything to there?
No.
No. Minutes. Do we have the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And can I sign them as a true and accurate record? Okay. No. And item 4 then is the substantive update, the report to the shareholder committee progress update. Who wants to introduce that?
Well, I'm not going to say, I might hand over to James if there's anything particularly want to mention to us in terms of particular milestones in the programme since the committee last met. I wonder if that's the best way to frame the discussion. And then I don't know, Chair, how you want to take it from there. We might want to then just spend a bit of the moment talking about what lies in front of us in the immediate future, in terms perhaps including a bit of conversation about kind of risks and issues and so on. But should we start with with recent progress?
Yeah.
Sure, happy to do that. So since we last met in July, we've mobilised both of the major contracts, both the primary and the plant with Vital Energy and the secondary network inside of blocks with Synergist. So in terms of the primary and plant, we have completed the work in Campbell Mews, adjacent to Bowmore Road apartments, and are currently after the Christmas break back on site at Beresham Close, where we're working very closely, including in terms of the resident front gardens, but also the public realm of the close as well. So far, we've managed to accommodate a number of the requests from residents in terms of how we make good their gardens, how they are able to park if needs be nearby on the wider Lancaster West Estate. So I think we're making pretty good progress now in terms of the primary network. In terms of the secondary network, as per the report, we're about 70% complete, probably a bit more than that now. In terms of the secondary network in the walkways, we have had to learn and manage a number of complaints around noise because of the concrete structure of the walkways and the significant amount of pipework that is running through the common areas. But we've been identifying different ways that we can manage noise, contain noise, and also improve the way we communicate. And also in terms of the fact that the heat network is now ahead of the main refurbishment, we have a lot of what was exposed pipework, and we've managed to find a way in an interim cost-effective way to contain that pipework so that the walkways looks less like a building site, to use the language that the residents understandably raises a concern. In terms of the tertiary networks, that's the actual systems in people's homes. To date, 2018, 325 of those have now been installed, including 300 smart thermostats. So both of which, even without the new primary and secondary networks going live, are already reducing bills for residents and reducing energy and also carbon. In terms of starting to look forwards in terms of the phasing of the plan, the most sensitive area we will be operating on in autumn is adjacent to the Grenfell Memorial Wall, just outside the memorial site. And we this week started conversations nice and early with colleagues in government and their representative contractors to ensure that we manage the sensitivity of how that particular work will be undertaken. And as we've done before, we will ensure that we communicate with all Grenfell related interested parties, not just those residents living on Lancaster West Estate. In terms of the budgets, there have been some discoveries of things that didn't fit in scope and some additional design work. But speaking sort of globally, we're confident as things stand that we can contain the costs within the programme budget as a whole, save the issue that has emerged, which we may talk about around the leisure centre roof. But we're working closely with colleagues to ensure that we take a good corporate approach to that as a council. In terms of looking a bit further ahead, actually going live, Treadgold House should all be complete by the end of May, with residents able to move back in from early April if they choose, but we'll be flexible with residents on when they wish to move back in, because there will be some remaining landscaping works that we need to complete. But Treadgold House is effectively a self-contained heat network that will then join the wider Notting Dale heat network. And so that allows us to pilot a range of different approaches to metering and billing, which, as we know, is one of the main concerns of residents. The one thing I would say that has changed since this report, because of some of the slippages, both on the council side but also on the contractor side, is realistically, I don't think we'll be proposing to go live with the main heat network now until early spring next year. And that's mainly a change from late autumn this year, mainly because the nature of heating and hot water systems aren't the sort of thing you'd want to be piloting in the depths of winter. But it might be a little bit more flexible and agile than that. But just broadly speaking, I think that's probably what we're going to be confirming in the next updated programme. Just touch briefly on social value, which is mentioned. So far, 5 residents have already secured employment, not just Lancaster West, North Kensington, through each of those 2 contractors that I've named, and then ongoing sustained employment roles. And in terms of the engagement, we're focusing now with residents almost exclusively on metering and billing and what it might actually cost when the main heat network goes live, working closely with the residents of Treadgold House, but also the wider estate as well, so that we avoid what other landlords have experienced, which is sort of a cliff edge shock of prices. One of the things we were keen to do and have done throughout is make sure that we sort of share the risk that is often falling on consumers, and make sure that residents aren't detrimented for effectively moving to a decarbonised heating and hot system earlier than the government requires.
Okay, I just wanted, and it's not quite how meetings should work, but in a way I wanted to kind of ask James to expand on one bit particularly. Given the role of this committee, as it were, one of the things is to act as the council's shareholder in the company. I just wanted to, if there's anything, James, that you particularly want to highlight in terms of the governance of the company and whether that's all running smoothly, if you see what I mean. In terms, I mean, there's obviously there's this committee's job is to kind of manage that governance relationship, and that's kind of why we have these meetings. You mentioned budget, so there's a governance question and a budget question. But my understanding is that system is working fairly smoothly. If there's anything about the particular kind of mechanics of the company that you want to bring to the committee's attention.
Sure. So we've got a full complement of the board that was recruited around sort of 2.5 years ago now, and every person is still there. From a sort of programme perspective, we've got a lot of value in terms of expertise on energy markets, social housing, financial operations of a heat network. Board meets, I think, bi-monthly at the moment. I think we've had about 10 board meetings so far. I think we've created opportunities as well for the shareholder committee to work with the board, and that might be meet with the board and discuss things. And that might be something now we're quite down the line in terms of the go live. That might be something worth doing again, to sort of just have an informal discussion at least with the board from their perspective. I certainly find that helpful myself in terms of bringing that external lens. We've also had a couple of independent audits as well, and we've worked with the Heat Trust in terms of some regulatory points of view. So I think we have got the sort of best of both worlds in terms of doing something totally in-house, but also something that brings the independence and scrutiny of an expert board. So from my perspective, obviously I'm in the fishbowl, but I think it's working really well. And the company such as it is at the moment, obviously it hasn't got customers and it's not running as a fully fledged company, but such as it is, it's certainly adding value.
Okay. Questions? Just one on finance. So, given what the national government have done to the bond rates in the United Kingdom, I was curious how much of our debt is yet to be drawn down. So, how reliant are we on the prevailing gilt rate for this project? I know we've secured some money through the mayor's subsidy, but how much is yet to come over? And at what rate were we pricing it in that?
So on the primary and the plant, the Mayor's Energy Efficiency Fund has covered that off, and we've locked in a lower rate. So 3.8. Yeah, and I think it's 11 million now, the MEF amount. And I think over the whole life of the tenor of the loan, it's say £2 million in total of interest compared to when we last met. So where I don't know, I've looked at Doug and Dan, is on the HRA side of it. I'm not quite sure what's funding what at the moment in terms of
what's our steady ship base rate that we price into our borrowing costs and what our forecast.
So I know what the HRA has got an interest rate of 4.5 is what's factored into our business plan
on a 30-year loan or a 25-year loan.
On yes, it is.
And it's trading at like 5.11, 5.12 at the moment, 25 years.
But that's and that advice has come from Treasury, our Treasury.
Could we revisit that? Because we had sort of autumn last year expected Bank of England to cut rates faster. We'd expected all sorts of other sort of fiscal improvements in the situation, but we've only seen a degradation of Britain's capability to borrow.
Yeah, we've factored in no reduction in that over the term of our business plan because
so we had some upside, but we're currently we had potential upside if they had brought it down.
Yeah, I mean yes, absolutely, and that has a huge impact on the housing revenue account because now we're borrowing across the piece. So,
well, it just strikes me over the last 10 years of borrowings, we've chosen the most expensive period in which to borrow large amounts of capital for the council. Be that through Public Works Loan Board or through other capital markets, this must have a material impact on our ability to make, even break even from this offer.
Yeah, and at risk of saying absolutely bleeding obvious, it's a question, an issue which goes beyond this project, isn't it, to the whole council's capital investment programme. I think probably we would to kind of fully answer your question, we'd probably get some colleagues from finance here so we can take that away if you want. And I don't know if you want to hear, or perhaps in another forum, we can ask finance to pull together an account of how they approach those risks in the way that they forecast the impact of the capital programme on the council's finances.
Okay.
I suppose my question is with my housing hat on is thank you, James, that Treadgold's heat on this summer, so that would be very interesting. I think we'll learn a lot of lessons as well from that too, so I think that would be very good. But of course that is thermally insulated, it's got all the new cladding and the new triple glazed windows on. So my question is, you talk about heat on spring 2026 for the rest of the estate, but as we know, a lot of the estate has not had its physical works done to it. So how do you think that's going to go? I mean, obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but and I'm glad to hear that you're having a lot more resident meetings and explaining the metering and everything. I think that's going to be an issue. But what provisions have we got that this new way of providing heat in an old stock building, and what are the mitigating factors?
Yeah, really, and it probably I think it's strategic sort of risk that we're actively sort of analysing and managing, as you know. So we're all aware of the challenge with the commitment amongst the Westfield Co-Design 21st Century Modern State is it requires additional funding for us to fulfil that commitment, and also meet the council's carbon neutral commitment, and indeed the commitment from all levels of government, and we're working actively to try and solve that funding gap. That's a backdrop. We of course are also looking at how we ensure that the heat network is compatible with, let's call it our existing stock as is, in that the majority of it won't have been refurbished at the point you're ready to switch on. I think in a nutshell, there are some cost implications, but they are manageable. It is technically possible. For example, it may involve us putting in slightly larger radiators than we imagine. So there are simple technical solutions. The bigger concern is probably around cost. So heat networks now, I think that because the Lancaster West Group for so long talks about the carbon neutrality piece and the co-design piece and the fact that it would be a very low demand heat network, interestingly, one of the reasons why it's not commercially lucrative is because we are planning to bring down the heat demand so much. But you see heat networks retrofitted now, most recently in a castle in Scotland, for example. So there isn't anything technically unfeasible around installing a heat network in leaky stock in heat terms, but it is the cost piece. Right. And of course, what we need to do is triangulate the risk there in terms of residents, going back to the point that I've made, as well as in terms of the price promise, what that might do to the HRA. The good news is all the work that we are doing in terms of the tertiary network and people with residential homes, that's enabling a reduction in terms of the amount of energy that people are using. So we are going in the right direction. There are a number of things that are happening that are going in the right direction. I think certainly once we've done this sort of pilot work in terms of what people actually are using, and it's also, I think the thing that has come to the forefront is not what is acceptable. So we're quite confident we can get a residential dwelling to 21 degrees. What we are finding is because of the inefficiency of the Lancaster West heat network, particularly in the walkways, as we know, it's most expensive in the borough, people are used to living in temperatures 25 degrees. So it's not just the actual technical, is this acceptable degree of comfort and therefore affordable, it's what people are used to. So that transition piece, I think, is going to be key. So to sort of actually answer the question, we're looking at a range of different sort of measures and things that we can do. But in terms of technical compatibility, that won't be a problem. So it won't be a case the heat network can't be switched on. So it's probably more around the cost management and the support we provide, particularly to vulnerable residents. I think is probably the bit.
And the individual metering. I think the more information about that, switching from a communal heat network, where everybody just pays a share of the bill, to actually being in control of your own amount of usage, I think is really what residents want. But that's a new way of doing things. So.
Yeah. And we're looking as well at we've obviously got 2 gas boilers at the moment. The temporary boiler is absolutely a shibboleth of the impact of Grenfell, and it's often things brought up. So we need to move to temporary boiler, no question. But in terms of LW3, the boiler adjacent to Clarendon, one of the things we're looking at is do we keep that? Do we keep that to keep prices down? And we sort of have a bit of a hybrid transition. Yeah. That's something that looks probably technically viable as well. There might be some contractual manoeuvres we need to do and negotiation, but we are looking at a range of different things. And I think the fact that we are now on site and we've learned a lot more, and we're certainly understanding more how our stock reacts to the current heat network, and residents are sharing with us their experience of living in refurbished properties. And certainly Treadgold House will provide us with a really good opportunity to understand what that transition looks like. As we all know, what we will get from the residents of Lancaster West is feedback. So when they move in, we'll be welcoming that and using that for the greater good. And we're also sharing a lot of that knowledge and expertise with colleagues in wider housing management, as we know there's a borough-wide challenge in terms of the investment of our stock and transition to carbon neutral.
And we have a couple of smaller schemes that we've done. So there, for instance, of the SLC pump, and that was difficult because we got it fixed again. We inherited the TMO, but it was broke. We fixed it, and that they wanted to work with that's right, because that was a hybrid with a supplementary gas boiler as well, gas for that. And we've disaggregated the heating costs at Trellick to individual and that has equally caused some huge differences in what people consume.
What's the cost of the consumer in the there now?
I
more or less
than
it
was
was
before.
before.
So I don't
appreciate
know.
prices are volatile, but how are they saving money, I suppose?
I don't think they are. So I think the way that we've been doing it up to this stage, or at least we've got heat metering regulations we've got to do, is that I think it's been pulled around the clock.
There's some very high users.
So,
Pulling the heat.
but whereas at
And
Trellick
others
we
are
depooled
subsidised.
in, Trellick is all electric, we depooled that, and going from what was a standard charge to a variable charge is quite an eye opener in the variance of what people pay.
Is it too early to tell whether that move to the individual billing by household is over time reducing
Yeah, it's too early because where we've got to is we've told people what they were using. We were in a position where we said we would tell them what they're using before we reduce it. So they get a year's. You can cut that down. That's not going to be a luxury we have here.
No, but presumably, I know it's separate to this, but it's just interesting. Separate. I mean, presumably we know the amount of energy flowing to the building, regardless of what individual person uses. So have we seen a reduction of net?
I would have to go away and find it. I don't know off the top of my
It'd
head.
be interesting because we've done a test case. We might as well see what the future of this looks like.
And just kind of anecdotally, in terms of insulation, separate from a heat network, that, for example, another one of our states, Swinbrook, where we've done double glazed windows, people have said how much more thermally kind of secure their home feels, noise reduction, and all of that. So even I'm hopeful that even if we don't get around to doing absolutely everything straight away when the heat comes live, hopefully it won't be as bad as we're fearing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it will be very difficult without the fabric to provide probably the real solid impact. You know, I don't sit by the window because it's too cold in the winter, that sort of stuff. I mean, you know that in terms of 70% of Lanc West properties are single glazed,
Yeah.
of course. But yeah, I mean, in terms of control, we've got to bring heat metering in. So at the moment, if I'm sitting in the walkways and I don't have a shower, I pay for the fact that next door might have 10 a day. So there's no real incentive. So there's a range of things happening. But yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is marry. Obviously, the funding gap is the major issue at the moment. Disruption as well. Even if we had the funding, would we do the whole estate now? Well, I don't think residents would want us to be doing that. But absolutely, in terms of giving residents control, as they have to pay for their individual usage, that means they can then reduce their bills as they wish. And also from a thermal comfort level, we've got people who don't have any central thermostat, so the heating is either on or off for 6 months of the year because the landlord's decided. So we are moving to a much more customer-focused approach, even without any of the refurbishment.
I had a couple of questions. So one, we talked a bit about feedback. And I was at the last metering workshop, but what feedback are we getting so far on the works that are already underway? Can you talk a bit about what you're hearing from residents?
Yeah, so in terms of the works in the public realm, certainly in terms of common area noise and dust and disruption has been the main concern. As we know, at the last workshop, we had a number of leaseholders there, and we are in the process of just confirming a revised communication so they'll be really clear on what isn't being recharged and what is. It's hugely complex on Lancaster Westfall manner of reasons, and we're working with colleagues in home ownership to hopefully address the concerns there around any particularly high bills. But I think the main concern is around the cost, and so we were at a meeting earlier today where we are looking to bring sensors in that allow the resident to see what they're using, allow us to see what they're using, because we've had issues around people take the devices and then we can't get the data, so we don't know what's really going on. So we will certainly in the next 3 to 6 months have a really good idea of what people are living at the moment. If they've got triple glazing, is that changing what they're doing? Are they still living at 25 degrees or not? Are they turning their heating down as one would expect? So that will allow us to do a lot more work in that regard. And we've been successful in achieving a £600,000 grant, I think, from the National Lottery, particularly on this area of resident transition, as we're sort of calling it, which is through the Council's Green Skills Academy, which is specifically to work closely with residents. So we'll have a specialist resident liaison officer who, when you move back into, say, Treadgold House, will talk you through what an MVHR does, how you use it, induction hob, the new heating system, the smart stat, and all that sort of thing. Because we are finding residents are moving back in, and where they haven't necessarily had that sort of induction, for want of a better phrase to use the pun, they're not necessarily grateful for some of the improvements. So the MVHR is a good example in terms of people who are staying in
So just
situ.
explain that
Sorry,
mechanical
ventilation with heat
system.
recovery.
So this is really important because as you
Really
say, we're putting in a whole new bit of kit to make these flats
improves the air quality, keeps the
fairly
heat,
efficient, but you have to have all
reduces
those
damp and
on.
mould, but you lose quite a large amount of covered space in terms of in a new build, you're fine. But in a
You've
in
been
a
used to something
retrofit,
different.
yeah. So there are those challenges as well, and we all have challenges around people saying, well, I don't want you to put the MVHRs in. Now, from a planning point of view, building control point of view, we have to offer it. So we're having to explore legal mechanisms where, is it permissible, where we say, well, okay, you need to sign this to say we've offered it, you've said no, you now need to be responsible for shock ventilating your home twice a day.
They'd rather have the money, presumably.
Well, we wouldn't be offering them the money.
The space. But this is a really important point because if you completely and utterly seal your flat to be a kind of a box,
got to ventilate.
You have to ventilate. In the olden days, and current days, now you open the window. And if that facility is no longer there, or whatever, then you're going to get really bad condensation and damp and mold. So I think we've got to be really, really clear on that, and I think that is a potential huge risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I also want to talk. There have been delays on certain elements of the work, and we've had a couple now of kind of structural challenges to the program over the past 6 or 12 months. One was KAA in terms of the decision they made. Another that I just want to hear you talk a bit more about is the roof at the leisure centre, because obviously it's pretty critical to the program working as we've been planning. But we're able to progress that at the speed we want to. How are we going with that, and what can we say about how that's going?
So I want to say a bit about the overall context, and perhaps James can talk about kind of how it leads directly to the programme for the heat work. So the programme is the current technical plan is for the heat pump. I'm looking to James to quote. I'm getting the technical thing wrong, but the heat pump, the primary heat pump for the network, would be sited on the roof of the Kensington Leisure Centre. That was the result of quite a lot of detailed options work about what the potential alternatives were, and that emerged most of the margin was the third option. But it's complicated for kind of two interrelated reasons. Firstly, the roof of the leisure centre is itself faulty and has been the cause of, among other things, leaks into the building, and this has been a problem since it was built. And so, what you can't do is just put the heat pump on the roof without addressing those issues that are associated that are causing the leaks. And of course, there's an opportunity to do all that work at the same time. But the further complication is that that is the subject of an ongoing dispute, that problem with the roof. And so there are issues which I won't go into too much detail on in a public meeting to do with how we resolve that and the timescale at which we can resolve that, and potential kind of implications, financial and otherwise, for the kind of what different resolutions of that might look like, which we need to work through before we can kind of confidently make an informed decision that might be a balanced of risk decision about whether and how to proceed with the work to install the heat pumps and continue to do the work to the roof that is necessary for the heat pumps. So at the moment that situation is unresolved. Yeah. And at this moment, the fact that it's unresolved is not creating a problem for the heat network programme. But of course, there comes a point where that is a problem. James can say a bit more about some of what that might mean in precise timing terms. But it's now probably in terms of the notwithstanding all the kind of transitional risks and so on that James has been talking about, in terms of kind of direct operational risks to do with construction projects, and this is probably one of the reddest ones, which is getting a lot of attention, not just from James's team, but across the whole council.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And just to add, I suppose we need to be in a place where internally we have a route to remediation of the roof, of whatever route by for the end of March, really, in terms of managing. We've got mobilised contractors at the moment, working with colleagues to sort of expedite and explore the way that we can do that. That obviously, just does the council's fiduciary duty, but also doesn't delay the works that we need to do to the roof. I would say in fairness, we've got quite a good relationship with the contractor. Obviously, this isn't the only work that they're doing. We've got the thermal store, we've got the renewable boiler room, and so on. So there's a degree to which we can flex things, but as Dan said, there's a balance of risks there, not just financial that we need to consider. But broadly speaking, all roads lead to getting the section of the roof remediated where we have got planning permission, and it makes sense to put the items up there and getting them up there as soon as we can.
But I think it's probably important to say, kind of particularly in the context of what this committee is for from the government's point of view, that judgment based on balance of risks will be a judgment for the council to make, not the company.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the leisure centre is a council asset, not a company asset.
Okay.
So that decision will not, as it were, come through this committee in that sense. It will be one for us to make in a different way.
Okay. I just think it's important to flag that's
Really,
that's
yeah, absolutely.
unresolved risk.
Yeah.
And it's obviously very important that we get that right because it's fundamental to the programme, and that it needs overthink rectification in terms of the roof, or alternatives may need to be explored.
And of course, my colleagues who are responsible for the management of the leisure centre would also say it is resolved from their point of view too.
Okay. I didn't have anything else. Is there anything else anyone wants to? No. Okay, then we are on to any other business. Is there any of that? No. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. Behind the creamy.
Oh, yeah.
So if we run, I mean,